Vote counting has started in Armenia's parliamentary elections. And polls close in France's first round regional elections. The world commemorates the World Refugee Day, a day to remember millions of people forcibly displaced from their homes. Hello and welcome to teleSUR. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the south. Vote counting has started in Armenia's parliamentary elections. Elections were called by incumbent Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan following protests over the country's defeat in a war with Azerbaijan last year. Around 2.6 million people are eligible to vote parliament members under a proportional electoral system. A winning party needs to obtain at least 50% of seats plus one and can be assigned additional seats in order to form a government.
Everyone has their opinion. I hope people will not conflict. If they care about the country, they have to accept facts. If people will elect someone, this someone has to be able to govern the country. We hope there will be not fraud.
Polls have closed in France's first round regional elections. About 48 million people were eligible to vote for new assemblies in France's 13 regions and 96 departments. The voting will be held over 2 consecutive Sundays, with a second round set for June 27, unless parties win more than 50% in the first round. A possible record abstention rate of up to 60% is also seen as a major factor in this election.
I think that there will be a lot of abstention, but I would say that it's a pity for the people who won't go to vote, because we have a possibility. It's a democratic moment. I think that we must express ourselves. It's now or never. You cannot wake up tomorrow with a hangover and say, damn it.
I have the impression that politics always stagnates at the same level, whatever the party, so there you go. We'd like a bit of freshness in all this. I'm going to vote, but I'll certainly vote blank again this year, also to show discontent we can have.
Iran's current judiciary chief, Ebrahim Raisi, has won the country's presidential election in a vote marked by low turnout and calls for a boycott. By noon local time on Saturday, the long-serving conservative judge won 62% of the votes, according to preliminary results released by the National Electoral Commission. With about 90% of the votes counted, Raisi had won 17.8 million votes, as reported by the head of Iran's Interior Ministry election headquarters, Jamal Orf. Raisi's rivals conceded defeat before even the final results were released.
Mr. Ebrahim Raisi took the first spot after winning 17,926,345 votes and was elected by the people's president, a trustee for the executive branch. Mr. Mohsen Rasaen Mirgaer won 3,412,712 votes. Mr. Abdolnasser Emati won 2,427,201 votes. And Mr. Amir Sohain Ghazizadeh Hashemi won 999,718 votes. The rest of the votes are considered voided ballots, which are around 3,726,870 votes.
Iranians have expressed hope for the country's new president. They are confident he will be able to improve the country's economic performance. The president-elect Ebrahim Raisi has pledged to improve Iranians' livelihoods and to bring the Iranian economy back on the right track. Analysts attribute Raisi's victory to his call for plans to improve the economy, which has been seriously affected by U.S. sanctions and the COVID-19 pandemic.
Currently, the main issue for people inside Iran is the economy. So many did not vote this year because they felt neither a reformist or a moderate president has been able to improve the economy of a country which is among the 15 mineral-rich countries in the world with huge oil and natural gas reserves, in fact. Now the Iranians hope Raisi, who is aligned with the main sources of power in Iran, could move the economy towards the right track.
West Africa states have announced a roadmap to monitor the situation in Mali after the coup before considering lifting its suspension from the regional bloc. Addressing the media during the Economic Community of West African States meeting in Ghana, the president of the bloc's commission, Jean-Claude Brod, said although there is progress in Mali after the coup, there is still no need to monitor how the peace and democratic process is being implemented. The 15 members bloc suspended Mali's membership following the second coup carried out by the army last month.
When you look at the situation, there are positive developments, but at the same time, the head of state indicated that those positive developments, we need to follow that. We need to continue to monitor this development in terms of how they are implementing the order decision of the roadmap determined by the head of state. So, at this stage, while they saw positive development, they thought that due to the fact that they want to see how firm is progress being made, the suspension is still maintained.
Political parties in Ethiopia are winding up campaigning for next week's presidential elections. The elections, which have been postponed twice, mark the first test of both supporters for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, Africa's youngest leader and Ethiopia's first leader from the Oromia region. About 37 million Ethiopians have registered to vote on Monday, although many will have to wait until the second poll phase, scheduled for September, due to logistical, legal, and security-related problems.
It is a special opportunity to elect our leaders, so we should vote with our cards and accept the election results peacefully. Every Ethiopian should participate in the election and accept the election results. That is what we all are praying for today.
And public officials in Amhara, northern Ethiopia, prepare electoral materials and begin setting up polling stations ahead of the country's general elections. The elections were delayed almost a year due to the coronavirus pandemic and rescheduled for June 5th. However, the timetable fell behind and a new date was scheduled for June 21st. Africa's second most populous nation has been rocked by violence, particularly in the war-torn region of Tigray. Libya's coastal highway linking the country's east and west, which has been closed for 2 years due to conflicts, has been reopened. The country's interim president, Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Deiba, officially opened the highway during an inauguration ceremony attended by government officials and military personnel. The Prime Minister said the move will help to turn a page after a decade of conflict. The key highway, which stretches between the cities of Misrata and Siret, was cut off in 2019 as Eastern-based military strongman Khalifa Haftar launched an offensive to seize the Libyan capital Tripoli.
On this blessed and historic day, we are participating in the opening of the main vital axis that connects the east and the west of our country and facilitates communication between the people of the north and the south. My dear people, from this rostrum, I call on all brothers and sons to renounce divisions, forget grudges, and move forward towards reconstruction.
Today it commemorates the World Refugee Day, a date to remind the world of the situation of millions of people forcibly displaced from their homes. June 28 was designated in 2001 by the United Nations General Assembly as a day to reflect on people displaced due to persecution, conflict, violence, and human rights violations. Gilbert Achar, a professor from the School of Oriental and African Studies of the University of London, explained how frequent military interventions led by the United States and West allies have fueled the displacement of people from their homes across the world.
So refugees are coming from conflict zones, and in the key conflict zones, Western countries have been heavily involved, whether it is Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria, to take the three main sources here. These are three countries in which the Western powers, and above all the United States of America, followed by Britain, have been extremely involved, active. And so they have a major share of responsibility in this refugee crisis, you know, and yet they don't, you know, they don't work by this. They don't acknowledge this responsibility, recognize the responsibility, and take refugees in.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Supporters of the Peru Libre Party have demonstrated in Capital Lima in the so-called National March in defense of presidential candidate Pedro Castillo. On June 6th, Castillo faced up against Keiko Fujimori from the Fuerza Popular Party in the second round of the presidential election. And according to the National Office of Electoral Processes on the official results, Pedro Castillo received 50% of the votes and Fujimori received 49%. However, no winner has been declared so far. The body in charge of announcing the elected president said it is still reviewing the ballots amid allegations of voting irregularities.
Unfortunately, Mrs. Keiko Fujimori is a corrupt woman who should not be president and should accept her defeat because what won here is the democracy, the fair vote of the people.
Here we are, the people from all regions, to protest against Keiko Fujimori, who has not even reached the 49% of the vote. That's the truth. As you see, we are here from all the 24 Peruvian regions, protesting against Keiko and against the electoral jury that has not yet proclaimed teacher Pedro Castillo Terrones as president of the country.
Meanwhile, the interim president of Peru, Francisco Sagasti, has condemned a call from retired soldiers of the armed forces to prevent the presidential candidate Pedro Castillo from eventually being proclaimed the winner of the June 6th round of vote. Fears of a possible coup and calls for another election have emerged as losing candidate Keiko Fujimori continues to claim fraud.
What is unacceptable is that a group of retired people from the armed forces intends to incite the high command of the Army, Navy and Air Force to break the rule of law. Yesterday, letters with only one signature and a list of names were presented to the General Commands of the Armed Forces and directed to the General Commanders and the head of the Joint Command of the Armed Forces, asking that they act against the Constitution and laws. As Constitutional President of the Republic, I reject this type of communication, which are not only contrary to democratic values and institutional framework, but are also acts at odds with the Constitution and the laws.
Still in Peru, at least 27 people have been killed and several injured when a bus fell into an abyss on an Andean road. A bus carrying miners fell into a cliff near the famous Nazca lines in the Ayacucho region. This is the second deadly accident to happen on the same road in the last 10 days. According to Peruvian media reports, the bus fell into a 450-meter abyss and bodies were scattered on the slopes of a hill in the desert area. Accidents have been happening in this area and have been attributed to poor road conditions, speeding, and lack of signaling.
The procedure is to be able to bring all the bodies to this area, order them, take them to the Puquio morgue, and mainly do the respective tests, alcohol levels, and all those tests on the driver.
Hundreds of demonstrators rallied in the streets of Rio de Janeiro on Saturday, calling for the resignation of Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro. Activists critical of Bolsonaro's handling of the coronavirus pandemic had called for a nationwide protest across 300 Brazilian cities. Brazil's Senate is investigating how the coronavirus death toll got so high, focusing on why Bolsonaro's far-right government ignored opportunities to buy vaccines for months. According to health authorities, the COVID-19 casualties have surpassed 500,000, the second highest in the world behind the United States. The demonstrations were also against his economic policies. They say harm the poorest and the working class.
The fact that we are here all against Bolsonaro. We are not waiting for the next election. We want to remove him now. He's no good for one more minute in power. What comes next will certainly be much better than Bolsonaro. Opposition to the Bolsonaro government is extremely important. We are here not to die. The COVID-19 virus is less dangerous than this genocidal president.
The European Union's Special Envoy for Peace in Colombia has expressed the bloc's concern regarding the deaths of demonstrators during the national strike protests. European official Eamon Gilmore met with President Iván Duque to express concern regarding the violent acts of the security forces and reiterated his commitment to ensure accountability for the serious abuses and human rights violations. Activists and NGOs have collected data on over 70 deaths, the majority of which are at the hands of the security forces. A new death was reported in the city of Cali precisely during Gilmore's visit.
I spoke to the president about the concern we have in Europe surrounding the death of demonstrators, and the president reiterated his commitment to ensure accountability and that the applicable reforms be implemented, and these issues will be addressed, and that everything triggering the demonstrations will be addressed. And we also spoke about the need and willingness to have a dialogue at the national, regional, and local levels.
In the United States, Puerto Rican communities in the city of Chicago fight against capitalist real estate speculation. Our correspondent Brian Meir brings us more details in the following report.
Over the last 40 years, nearly half of Chicago's Puerto Rican community, the U.S.'s second largest, has been pushed out to the suburbs due to a predatory capitalist real estate speculation process called gentrification.
Well, I think the way to understand gentrification is to place it within the context of spatial deconcentration. And that is to place it within the context of another form of colonialism. From the very beginnings of modern colonialism, the native people have been spatially deconcentrated from their areas.
In the epicenter of Chicago's Puerto Rican community of Humboldt Park, the mayor's office installed a yuppie jogging path, and cheaply built $1 million condominiums are cropping up everywhere, driving up rent prices and making it impossible for long-time homeowners to pay their real estate taxes.
The history that my family has created in this community with the murals, with our stories, with the parade, has informed my humanity, and so to see all of my community be destroyed through this process of gentrification is a really dehumanizing process.
But the community is fighting back. After years of pressuring politicians, a state law was just passed declaring Humboldt Park as a cultural empowerment district.
The idea through this legislation will create out of this area as Puerto Rico town, which means that we're going to be able to harness many of the resources of the state from all the departments to focus them on a community that has been marginalized and that obviously has been part of the disinvestment of the society as a whole.
So at this year's parade, Chicago's Puerto Rican community had something to celebrate. Brian Meir, teleSUR, Chicago.
And we have more stories coming up after one last break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Russia has confirmed almost 18,000 new COVID-19 cases over the past 24 hours. This is twice the figure of early this month and a new record since February 1st, the official Monitoring and Response Center says Saturday. Moscow, Russia's worst-hit region, reported 9,120 new cases, setting a record and taking its total to 1,278,000. The national government and the Moscow municipal government attribute the new wave of infections in Russia to the rapid spread of the highly contagious Delta variant and a low vaccination rate. The total number of coronavirus cases in the country now stands at 5,299,000. Significant progress has been made in the Iran nuclear deal talks, according two diplomats attending an international meeting in Austria. Officials attending the meeting say the progress has been made between Iran and global powers to try to restore the 2015 agreement abandoned by the U.S. Trump administration. In a media briefing on the sidelines of the talks, an official who chaired the final sixth round of talks between Russia, China, Germany, France, Britain, and Iran said they were close to a deal, but were still discussing some remaining important points.
We are closer than we were 1 week ago, but we are not still there. We have made progress on a number of technical issues. We have now more clarity on technical documents, some of them quite complex, and that clarity allows us to have also a clear idea of what the political problems are.
There are a few controversial points which require political decisions. Apparently, diplomatic efforts to find common language have been almost fully exhausted. So the time has come for political decisions.
Hundreds of young people have queued up on Sunday in London, UK, to get their COVID-19 vaccine dose. Anyone aged 18 and over was able to book an appointment or just show up at the Tottenham Stadium in North London. The government wants for everyone 18 and up to have a jab by July 19, the date earmarked for the lifting of the remaining social and economic restrictions. At the moment, more than 4/5 of adults in the UK had had at least one shot of vaccine. Britain is seeing a rise in coronavirus cases driven by the more infectious Delta variant, first identified in India.
I'm excited for the future. Hopefully it all goes well after this.
Everyone's pulling together and it's going incredibly well. The atmosphere has been great, lots of smiles on people's faces, so yes, it's been very much worthwhile.
A school undergoing construction work has collapsed in the Belgian city of Antwerp, killing 5 workers and injuring many others. Firefighters and rescue dogs worked through the night after Saturday's accident to pull out the victims, while the construction company cleared rubble and worked to secure the site. Among those injured, 3 were in intensive care, 5 others were hospitalized, and 1 has been discharged, according to local authorities. An investigation was underway into the cause of the accident. The life of COVID-19 patients in Afghanistan is under threat as the country has run out of oxygen in the midst of a third surge of the pandemic. Officials say the situation has gone out of control, with oxygen manufacturing facilities overwhelmed in an increased cases. Afghanistan has already received a donation of 900 oxygen cylinders from Iran. A representative of the International Federation of Red Cross has assured that the organization will facilitate for the establishment of an oxygen generation plant into the country.
To save lives, that's the primary immediate need. And to do that, you really need to make sure that they have access to clinical care as soon as possible, especially those who get severe symptoms and need oxygenation. So in that case, oxygen is important, and the supply of oxygen has to be ramped up. A solution has to be found around that.
COVID-19 cases continue to rise in India as the country battles to sustain the economy grossly affected by a long lockdown. India's Ministry of Health has reported that almost 60,000 new cases have been recorded in the past 24 hours, and over 1,500 people have died from the virus within the same period. India has partially opened up businesses to save its economy from collapse due to a prolonged lockdown. All shops and restaurants have been allowed to open in capital New Delhi with effect from Monday. However, schools, colleges, other educational institutions will remain closed. A group of protesters have gathered at the venue for Japan's Tokyo Olympic Games to call for the cancellation of the event due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The demonstrators are concerned that the Games can be a hotspot for the spread of the virus, and they demanded the event to be cancelled. The Olympic Games are scheduled to start on July 23rd in Tokyo. However, Japanese residents are skeptical if there are going to be efficient safety measures during the biggest international sporting event as the pandemic continues spreading in the Asian country. Thousands of protesters have rallied in the Spanish capital Madrid to support Western Sahara's quest for independence from Morocco. Other similar marches were held in other parts of Spain, magnifying the demand for Spain and Morocco to grant autonomy to the region. Morocco annexed the area in the 1970s after Spain's colonial administration ended, and it considers the vast territory as part of the Moroccan kingdom. The situation got worsened last December when the U.S. Trump administration formally recognized Morocco's sovereignty over Western Sahara in a return for Rabat's normalization of ties with Israel.
We are Sahrawi, and we want freedom for our country. We want to fight because who doesn't have land doesn't have anything. The Spanish people are 100% supportive. They have always given a warm and nice support to the Sahrawi people for decades now. We hope this becomes a reality for the freedom of the Sahrawi people.
And with this story, we come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.